Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, playoff eve is upon us, and Denver is facing a familiar foe in the Minnesota Timberwolves. Matt Brooks is back in the house, and we are talking everything Nuggets Wolves. Is it Denver's turn to get the upper hand in this rivalry, or will they be bested again? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with writer and digital content specialist for the Denver Nuggets and my good friend, Matt Brooks. How are you doing today, Matt?
Good. Always excited when I get invited. It's always fun to go through some film and everything of the sort. So excited to be here.
Awesome. You guys may recognize Matt as the most frequent guest on this podcast. You may also know him from his articles on nuggets.com. He does pregame kind of game preview work as well as postgame analysis. And he just posted a really great, I think, series preview for Nuggets Wolves. And we're going to delve into some of that on here. But I highly recommend you check out that article if you want to kind of learn more into the nooks and crannies that that Matt decided to delve into with this series. And he's also the host of the extremely educational Nuggets Knowledge series over on the Denver Nuggets YouTube channel. But I know him as just the most extremely thorough state-sponsored media there is out there, where the state here is the team, the Denver Nuggets. You have the best sort of clip recaps of like big moments in games. So whenever I can't watch something live, I'll review like the moments that stood out to you in the clips that you post on Twitter before I go into my rewatch. And it's always fun because obviously like you work for the team, but I feel like you let your like emotion come out a bit more in those posts than maybe one would expect from someone that is like so close to the organization and maybe trying to like stay buttoned up or whatever. So I also highly recommend you guys follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Brooks NBA, right?
Yes, at Matt Brooks NBA.
Which is right under his name there.
You can tell when I'm into a game when I'm clipping. Yes. You can always tell. So,
yes.
Yeah, that's funny.
All right, before we dive into things, just really quick, this is also a mailbag episode, and like all our mailbag episodes that have a central topic, in this case, the Nuggets Wolves series, our mailbag questions will be dispersed throughout. There will not be one mailbag segment. So if you did submit a question, listen for it throughout the relevant section of our discussion. Please do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons. Really helps us out with the algorithm as we try to grow the channel. I'm anticipating, hopefully, some more growth here as we hit the postseason. All right, let's start with the big questions in this series, and I think the most obvious place to start is how does Denver deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves front court? So I'll let you kind of like set the stage for like that particular framing of this series before we delve into some of the specific clips, because I do think that it was a central question in your series preview as well, even if it wasn't explicitly stated.
Do you mean on defense or offense?
On either end of the floor. On either end of the floor.
I'll talk about the offense for Denver, because I think so. My general kind of loose overview is that I did not watch. So for this preview, 2,500 words, put a lot of time into it. I didn't watch any of the 2024 series. It just, I didn't think it was applicable. These two teams are really different. One of the biggest differences is probably in how, like, yes, I get that Minnesota's roster has changed, but I think how Denver plays is so much different than 2024. So one of the many things that I saw just in watching the 4 regular season games back is that Jokic, the big adjustment that Minnesota made, right, was putting Karl Towns on Jokic and having Rudy roam. And there are 2 reasons. Well, there's a bunch of reasons why they probably can't do that as much. One, you can't put Rudy on Aaron Gordon anymore because Aaron Gordon is now a 40% three-point guy, which is great for Denver. But the bigger thing to me that I saw on film was Jokic can just get to his spots so easily against somebody like Julius Randle. And if he's getting to his spots easily, we've seen this against the Spurs. We saw it against Minnesota this year. Like, if he's getting there and he's somewhere comfortable on the floor, his balance is there. It really doesn't matter if Rudy Gobert is helping weak side with a 7'9" wingspan, because Jokic is just going to take these touch shots over that help. So for me, I look at this series a lot differently because of that. Like, he's not going up against 2 centers, essentially 2 7-footers, and trying to navigate that. Now it's a 6'9", really strong guy in Julius Randle. Like, he's really strong. But it's just different. It's a different vibe. So when I look at that front court, how it relates to Denver, I really look at that. The double big lineup is just maybe not been a same level of factor, at least in the regular season, between these 2 teams.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I approached kind of putting together my notes and my outline for this series preview pretty similarly to you, in that both of these teams have changed so dramatically since the 2024 series. A lot of that was out the window. And so a lot of what I saw this year wasn't just Minnesota playing Rudy on Jokic straight up a lot more than they had in the past, but also some of the ways that I think Jamal benefited from that particular kind of unadjustment, where you go back to just kind of yoke and single coverage. So I want to talk a little bit about what it looks like when Minnesota is playing Rudy in that traditional, like, just one-on-one on Jokic, or playing traditional drop coverage with him, because a lot of kind of the latter half of our discussion is going to deal with all of the gimmicky ways that Minnesota is going to try to gum up the series. But I wanted to start with why the base stuff, at least defensively for Minnesota, is going to be a problem for them against Denver. So first things first, Jokic this season against the Minnesota Timberwolves, I pulled these stats from your article, 35.8 points, 15 rebounds, and 11.3 assists in 4 games against Minnesota this season. Denver went 3-1 in the season series. Things were a little bit wonky. So I think Minnesota was on like back-to-backs for 2 of them. Ant missed one of those games. AG missed one of those games. Everything was kind of weird. Denver had all kinds of people missing games all throughout the season this year. Looking at the matchup data as well, this season, and we know this is pretty much holds from past years. Jokic shot 65% from the field when guarded by Rudy directly. But even though it seemed from the eye test, watching the film, Rudy was guarding Jokic directly more than in seasons past with Minnesota. Jokic was actually guarded more frequently by Julius Randle by a little bit. So so you could call it about even, but the fact that it was even and not like, oh, the center is on the center, like clearly more, just tells you, even though Minnesota, Denver has all these like ways that they've been able to, that their roster and player development, players kind of, enhancing certain skills, especially the shooting, has made some of the roaming stuff more untenable. They still don't trust it, trust a base scheme of Rudy on Yoke, because they're getting absolutely torched in those alignments as well. Just in terms of looking at Jokic, before we get to Jamal versus those traditional coverages, which I'm about to touch on before I let you make your point.
I was just going to say, I think some of that too, and all the lineup data of Julius guarding Jokic, is that he's their only option for the bench to guard Nikola. So in my article, I had a bunch of clips of kind of what the bench looks like for Minnesota and how Denver attacks that. And it's mostly Nikola attacking Julius kind of back to the basket, and with Nas kind of being the helper. And that also hasn't really worked that well. So I'm assuming, and again, I guess I'd have to probably tally it up individually, but I do wonder if that Randle number is related to he's the only Jokic bench defender. Right. And if Rudy gets in foul trouble, or if they do try the double big, he's going to be that guy no matter what. So it's a big Julius series, I think, if you're Minnesota.
Yeah, on both ends of the floor, which we'll get to.
We'll get to that.
But before we get to how Minnesota likes to, like I said, try to gum up the works a little bit with some of their more gimmicky defense options, I want to talk a little bit more about why it's not just the fear of Jokic that makes them want to do that. I want to get to how Jamal Murray operates against some of these traditional coverages. Oh, Matt, we lost you. Oh, there you are. Okay.
All right, I'm here.
Okay, great. With a few clips that actually appeared in your preview, and I thought that going through Jamal running Chicago action, or Denver running Chicago action for Jamal, was a great illustrator of why Rudy playing his regular drop coverage is not going to work against this team. Will, if you could bring up the Murray Chicago action clips here, and I'll just let Matt kind of explain as this clip goes on.
Sure.
I think there's a compilation as we.
Yeah. First off, Chicago action, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a really common NBA action. Teams have been running it for, 5+ years now. It combines a pin down screen with a handoff, right? So in these clips, for the most part, it's going to be Jamal, it looks like here, coming off a pin down from Cam. And then he goes into the handoff with Nikola. And I like that you bring up Gobert and drop. That is a good takeaway. Actually, in the article, when I was writing about this set, and I did go into a big tangent about this because I love this stuff, all the counters and game within a game stuff, which I guess right show to talk about this on, right? Is I think it's really interesting how differently Jamal is used now against Minnesota, right? Like so much of 2024 was Jamal bringing the ball up, and then, Minnesota kind of responding to that with ball pressure, and Denver having to react out of that and adjust to that as the series went on. This year it's different. Like, Denver already plays in a way where Jamal is like Mavs Kyrie, right? Like, he's off ball and coming off pin downs and, being a second side guy into handoffs. And it's just different. Like, as I said, like, you can't build too much off 2024 when you're looking at Denver's offense because of things like this, because of how somebody like Jamal is used, where he is off the ball a lot. And there are other guys like Christian Brown, Aaron Gordon, Bruce Brown, Cam Johnson, all these guys down the list that can bring the ball up for Denver and do bring the ball up for Denver. So, yes, I love that you're bringing up that Rudy is somebody that he will kind of have to adjust to that, because it's different. He's not guarding the two-man game as much anymore and playing drop and trying to take away shots at the rim and maybe stepping out, making a late switch onto Jamal, whatever. Like, this is a different type of offense that he and the rest of the Timberwolves are going to have to kind of solve, to be honest with you, throughout this potential 7-game series.
Yeah, and the other thing that stood out in that clip and some of the others, again, highly recommend checking out the article for the depth of it there, is how much easier it is for Jamal to evade Jaden off the ball. Like, Jaden has, size and length, and he's like relatively quick for somebody his size, but he's still not going to have, Jamal's still going to be able to get a step on him off the ball. Right.
Yeah.
And something else I wanted to point out, dovetailing off of what you said about how Jamal's role has changed as an initiator. Even when Jamal is bringing the ball up the floor, it kind of reminds me of Steph. He's not like running into walking the ball up and then having a screen set for him and running pick and roll. He is bringing the ball up, throwing the ball to whomever. It could be Jokic, it could be Cam, it could be AG. And then they initiate their set, and it usually involves Jamal doing something else off the ball.
Right.
And in a lot of possessions, it then results in him coming back and getting the ball there. But he's able to get a step on his defender a lot easier in that situation than he would if he was just operating up top with the ball in his hands from the get-go.
Right. Yeah. I it's interesting. You kind of just mentioned his name, but like, McDaniels is a really good defender, but sometimes when you make these like 6'9" guys have to get around two screens, that's tricky, right? Like, they literally just have more limbs to get caught on screens. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of the really good screen navigators are going to be like the Davion Mitchells of the world, who, 6'6" guard, but he just gets around screens because there's like less of him to do it, right?
Yeah, or Nikhil Alexander Walker, who thankfully is not in this series.
Right. So it's not just Rudy or McDaniels. It feels like Denver has curated its offense in a way that it kind of preys on little things a little bit more this go around. And that's kind of my thought coming into the series, is just like the biggest, and it was I for the preview that I did, I had a key question for each team. And my key question for Minnesota is just, all right, like, we've seen how you guard the Nuggets 2-man game. There's a ton of tape of that. But what does it look like when you're trying to keep up with their split action? What does it look like when you're trying to keep up with these, off-ball actions for Jamal? Like, that will be a big battleground for this series.
Yeah. Well, if you could pull up the Murray Chicago action counter next here. So if you could explain the next thing that's going on in this clip, because we're kind of going through the progressions here. In that first clip, Jamal comes off the pin down, runs into the DHO, gets downhill, hits that floater.
Sure. Yeah, this is I think we both love this stuff. Like, the game within a game, watching counters live in a game is like one of my favorite things you can see. So if you go from the beginning of the clip, you'll see Jaden he knows what's being run, right? Like, he knows, all right, they're going to try to run Chicago action out of this ATO. And he tries to cut underneath Spencer to get a better angle and ideally
and deny the handoff. Yeah.
Right. Or at least be in good position if Jamal comes off the handoff going left and, tries to take a pull-up three-pointer. Jamal sees this, and Jamal sees Jaden's like halfway around that screen on, I guess, the low side of that screen. He sees this, stops his cut to Jokic, and just cuts the other direction. And now it's a catch and shoot for the 5th best catch and shoot guy in the league this year. And again, this is what I mean. Like this is like some Mavs Kyrie stuff. Like as somebody who watched Kyrie a lot in Brooklyn, that's what this reminds me of. It's just the way he's used not only as like a pick and roll guy with Nikola, but you can use him. Like that basically functions as like a crossover, but off the ball, where he cuts back that way and gets this catch and shoot.
So I love that. I love that call.
Yeah, I've used that before. I wish I could pretend I this is the first
came
time
up with it on the spot. Yeah, well, you no, that I've used that.
I should have. Yeah, it's too honest there. But yeah, no, this is just cool. I think that stuff is always fun to watch. It's funny how you can run like a play that is relatively simple, quote unquote, and be like, it's a pin down and a handoff, and a lot of plays run it, or a lot of teams run it, but you're seeing, all right, what happens when a defense tries to adjust? How does Denver respond? And it's something as simple as that will make the world of a difference.
And then, if you could play the next one here, the Murray top lock counter, as Jaden tries something else here. So instead of going under to try and deny Jamal the ball, he under the in this case it's a cam screen.
Yep.
He tries to just deny him kind of outright.
Right. Yeah, top blocking, you see that a lot against pin downs, double staggers, like just anything with off-ball screens where a player is kind of going uphill towards a handoff like Jamal is going to try to do. We've seen that forever. That's a defense that's been used against, I don't know, I think like Kevin Durant is a good example, like somebody that uses pin downs a lot. So right here, Jamal sees that, again, really good off-ball player. He says, okay, you're going to try to top block me. I'm just cutting right to the rim. I'm going to get this easy off-ball layup. And again, it's a simple game when you explain it like that, but this is who Denver is, right? Like they're coming off their best offensive season in history, in franchise history. And I think a lot of that is not only due to how special of a shooting season they had and how great Jamal and Nikola are, but it's also the level of diversity you're seeing in games like this, where there's so many different ways they can attack you and cut you up, that something as simple as Chicago, we see 3 completely different shots in completely different ways for Jamal, and they're all successful. So yeah, experienced team, they're gonna get what they want. So it again, though, this is fun. Like I love this stuff. This is kind of what I live for in basketball.
So I wanted to follow this up with a question that the answer kind of scares me. Which is like we've seen Jamal versus Jaden in all 3 of these clips, and it seems like Denver is able to create, if not the shot they want, one of the shots that they want in all these instances. Mm-hmm. But do you expect Jamal to have this easy of a time versus Jaden once the playoff series actually starts?
I mean, no. I think like Minnesota is kind of flip the switch team a little bit. Seems like that's kind of the consensus. It was weird, like watching the 4 regular season games. Like of course I had a lot of takeaways for Denver, but I wrote about this in my preview too. Like there's a lot of stuff that Minnesota can clean up just in terms of like attentiveness, losing your man strong side. Like there's a lot of, it just felt like there was a lot they can clean up that's sort of low hanging fruit. And that's probably one of them. You can switch different guys on Jamal. Like this year he did a pretty good job against Ant. But I'm curious to see how that looks. Like Ant, we've seen it, like is really, really special in the postseason, not just for his offense, but we've seen him turn it up defensively too. So yeah, I have just a lot of respect for Minnesota. Like that's a really good team. They play really hard. I love watching them play Denver. Like it's always good games, it feels like. So I do kind of think that on both sides, to be honest, like there will be a little bit more attention to detail defensively.
I wanted to show one more clip here of Jamal against Ant, actually. Well, if you could bring up the Jamal 3 against Ant off the ball. So, well, that was a clutch turnover. This was a counter to the idea that Jamal might have an easier time with Jaden in the playoffs. But right here, again, to your point about Minny being able to clean up some of their attentiveness off the ball, feels like Ant just kind of fell asleep here. Again, Jamal off the ball. Chicago comes off the pin down, gets the handoff, and then steps into a 3 with Rudy playing drop. So, like, just the synthesis of everything that we talked about in this first section. But the way that Denver is operating now, making things a little bit easier on Jamal when it comes to actually trying to get to the shot that he wants to take. Whether Minnesota is able to, come back and like recover better. But some of the things that they're doing is just kind of making that initial job a little bit easier.
Yeah, look at that too. Yeah. It's 6 minutes left in that game, right? Like that. And again, I don't want to just be this like black and white about it, but I would say that's more likely in the 2024 series, Jamal being face guarded with the ball in his hand in 2024. Like this is what I mean. Like the way Denver runs their stuff all throughout the game. Like they know exactly what they're going to do at the end of games because they did it in the first quarter, right? Like they're still running off ball sets with a, kind of the game in the balance on a huge Christmas Day game. So I think that's one of their biggest superpowers this year is you're seeing that in that clip, like Jamal's coming off an off ball play. We saw that play in the second quarter. So again, that's a different type of defense that somebody like Anthony Edwards is going to play. He has to keep track of ball and his man, and then he has to keep track of a pin down and a handoff with 6 minutes left after what was a pretty exhausting game watching it back. Yeah. So that's kind of I think for me, that's a really good example of like what I'm trying to illustrate a little bit with. This is just a different Denver offense to me. It just feels really different watching these games.
All right. I want to move on to Minnesota's options when it comes to that roaming defense, that Rudy as a roamer defense. As you sort of alluded to in the beginning, there were not a lot of examples of Rudy roaming off of AG this season. And I do think that the shooting leap is part of why. But I think another part is because Minnesota thinks that they've found some other options to employ that defense. Well, if you could bring up the Jokic corner 3 as the first one here. In this clip, we've got Julius on Jokic, and Rudy is actually roaming off of Spencer, and Jokic sees that, gets Spencer the ball, but then they're able to recover it's very different having Spencer in that dunker spot versus like AG in the shape that he was in even a couple of years ago, being able to be like the like utmost threat in that position. But Spencer's able to gather the ball and get the ball back to Jokic, who backs up into the corner and nails this corner 3. He's been really good on corner 3s.
He's been so good. I love that you brought that up. Yeah, it's been really good this year.
He hasn't taken that many this season. And then, Will, if you could bring up the Jokic miss over Julius in this clip, again, Julius is the primary on Jokic here. And Rudy is actually roaming off of Bruce on the initial play. Denver's able to get the rebound here, and then Jokic ends up missing this shot over Julius. I do want to say though, similar to the numbers over Rudy, if you look at the matchup data, Jokic has shot 16 of 24, or 67% from the field, with Julius as the primary defender this season. Last year, though, when I looked at the data from last year, this Julius on Minnesota, that was like 47%, so quite a bit off. But like I said, he spent more time guarded by Julius this season than he was last year. It was a much smaller sample size last season, so that was interesting that Minnesota didn't go to that more in their regular season matchups last year. But Julius is strong enough to at least provide some resistance to the point that it's not like a situation where they're like, this is just not even an option for us. It's something that they're at least comfortable trying. Julius on Jokic for the value add from the Minnesota perspective of Rudy can make life more difficult on the others.
Sure.
And I'm actually thinking about it now just because of like how supercharged Denver's offense is, where they're, the number one offense in the league. I think they have a 130 offensive rating with Jokic on the floor this season. How much would Jokic have to be torching Julius in particular? Let's just stick with Julius in particular for Minnesota to be like, oh, this is untenable now relative to what they feel is a like unstoppable Denver team offense, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually think I would ask that about Rudy though. Like, I think just because of how they've defended Nikola so much with him as the primary, Julius feels like the adjustment they would make, and they would start Rudy in as the primary defender. So I'm not sure. I don't know if I know, because I think the order of that would be flipped. And I think even like if we're saying, all right, let's say Julius is guarding Jokic as the primary. Well, there's a lot of versions of that, right? Like you could try having Julius front and then you have Rudy back line standing there. That's something that Minnesota did not do as much. I just didn't see much fronting at all.
Just didn't see it.
Yeah. I could see McDaniels doing that too. So,
well, Julius is quite a bit quicker of foot than Cat. He's still not like the quickest guy. And I do think that the players that give Jokic the most, and not just Jokic, but like the team, the most issue when they're fronting Jokic, because that doesn't just cause issues for Jokic, but like the entry passer as well.
Sure.
And everyone trying to figure out what's going on. Are those like hyper athletic guy, like quick twitch kind of big athletes? I almost feel like Naz Reid would be a better option if like specifically fronting was what you wanted to do than Julius, because you can't just front and stay there. A lot of the most effective guys at that particular tactic are able to continually adjust their front as Jokic is simultaneously fighting for position. And the way that you can sort of win your side of that matchup, because Jokic has such a big size and strength advantage in gaining that leverage, is by leveraging foot speed to kind of like, continuously kind of stay in a position that is going to make it difficult on him and the entry passer. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Naz is interesting as a fronting option, because I didn't know where to put him defensively if I was Minnesota. So that's an option too, a little bit, is like, all right, this is a designated, like almost on ball role where like this is your role. Like you stand and you front and you be physical and you try to take away that angle. So that was kind of what I was going to add to that.
Yeah. Let's actually skip over to Will. If you could bring up the Devo steal on Yoke. So this was a DiVincenzo steal late in this game. This was the one that the Denver lost here. So you can see Yoke's in the post backing up Rudy. A little bit different than we see in a lot of the offense that we've been watching, but Yoke does post up like still a fair bit in these games. And then DiVincenzo comes from behind to steal the ball there. I remember actually talking about this after, like, during the regular season after this game, and I was like, I don't think Christian called this out at all. He was just like waiting for Yoke to get him the ball. And this is a continuous trend with Christian in particular. Will and I are going to get to it more in the back half of the show. But in addition to Rudy roaming off of guys, a lot of players are just kind of playing free safety when they're supposed to be guarding Christian Braun. And I do think that I'd like to see more in the way of counters from, like, specific counters to that from Denver. that don't just involve Christian shooting, although I still think that he needs to be like spacing properly and like willingly taking shots. But as we know from past years, because it feels like this is just like the continuous conversation with this team is like, who is X good defender helping off of, and how do we kind of get them involved in like screening actions? How do we like involve them as an initiator to kind of, kind of loosen up this defensive coverage? But I do think in the Minnesota matchup in particular, it is different in terms of like what counters you can employ there, because you've got Rudy there as the primary on Jokic. And now you've got, in this case, DiVincenzo as a small roaming, or we'll have some other clips later where it's like Ant helping off of Christian. I wouldn't be shocked if Minnesota ends up trying like Jaden on that matchup at some points. And we know that OKC likes to have Shea roaming off of Christian. SGA roams off of like whoever on a daily basis, so that's not a Denver specific thing. But having the small as the roamer when you've got Rudy as the primary on Yoke, I think is a very different look for Minnesota, but is actually quite reminiscent of what we see when other teams play Denver. And even though there were like very limited instances of that being the case in the film that I reviewed from this regular season, I wonder what you think of Chris Finch's willingness to kind of employ that in higher volume in this series.
I think anything's on the table. So I the games that I think are really like, what was it, Portland where Christian hit 5 threes? Like that.
San Antonio.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I'm getting, yeah. Okay. You're right. One of the two. I'm pretty sure you're right there. So like that's encouraging, but I also think like with that play that you just showed, like you can also just cut. Like you can cut to where a post player is, especially if they're helping. And now when you're on a single side like that, if you cut into the paint, yeah, Rudy's there. So is Nikola. So yeah. He's going to be worried about Nikola. You have the opportunity to cut, get to that right hand. I almost think, to your point about the cutting, the issue in that, the like biggest issue in that clip is that Christian started in the dunker spot as opposed to being somewhere else, having his defender at least have to account for him being somewhere else, and then kind of cutting in to, receive the ball in that situation where like he was just in the dunker spot, empty side spacing. There was no movement on that weak side, making it a lot easier for DiVincenzo to be like, okay, since we're just all just standing here, I'm just going to hop over and steal the ball. Right. Did AG play that game?
That was the last one. No,
that's the March game, right? He didn't.
Yeah.
That's where like, Coach Adelman was pretty like adamant all year about like when we get AG back in the dunker, it's gonna flip. And I do feel like that's a good example of being like, oh yeah, that is probably where he's gonna be in that spot. And maybe court alignments are a little bit different. So yeah, I think that's a good example of how different the spacing looks when it's, let's say Jamal, Nikola, and 4 or 3 wings more so than like a big forward kind of down there. So it's definitely like there's a lot you can kind of grab from that clip in terms of different ways you can attack it. But I also even wonder how much they're going to be in that situation where the spacing looks like that in the series.
Yeah. And I have this like running thing about empty side spacing with no movement. It's like the worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like every time I go back and watch a game and look at a possession I hate, it's like, oh yeah, it just happened to be that.
That's why I get excited about like exit screens and stuff. Like I love when it's empty side and then somebody sets the corner pin. Like that's just like it just brings me joy anytime that we get a corner pin. I love those plays. There was one I actually went through with JJ Barea a little bit earlier this year. They ran something against Boston and Jamal came off he got middle off a handoff and Christian set this exit screen, I think, for Peyton in the corner. And it's like probably my favorite play of the year. Like, I don't know. It's like one of those things that brings me joy. So yeah, no, there's a lot of different ways.
That was a Nuggets knowledge video, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Everyone go check out that Nuggets knowledge
self promo
clip over at the Nuggets YouTube channel with JJ Barea.
Yep.
That was definitely a good one. All right, let's move on to, we've talked a lot about Rudy one-on-one on Jokic, Rudy as a roamer. Let's talk about how the Jokic lineups will deal with Minnesota's small ball look. Will, if you could bring up the mini front court wowie picture here.
Oh, is this the lineup data?
Yes. Okay. So I wanted to show this because one of my favorite stats websites, Court Sketch, and I told Gabe that I would shout this out because it's a great website. I mean, I shouldn't be telling people this, but Gabe does not charge enough money for everything that is available on this site. It has way too much, including matchup specific lineup data. And I wanted to know, how do the different Minnesota front court configurations do against Denver? Or how did they do against Denver this year? Right. So when you had particularly looking at Nas, Rudy, and Julius. And as you can see here, they were all pretty bad, except for the Julius and Nas bench lineups, basically that didn't have Rudy, their 5-out look. And even those were kind of barely winning their minutes, in large part because they could not get a stop to save their lives. As you can see here, 128 offensive rating, awesome. 127 defensive rating, not great. That makes Denver look, like an average defense, which we don't have to get into quite yet here. But I wanted to show this just to illustrate how much of a difference there is in particularly the defense when Rudy is on the floor versus off. And how much more I think that Minnesota is going to have to lean on these lineups despite that, because the offense is so much better when you've got Rudy off the floor and you've got, Julius at 5 with Nas out there. Right. So
this is such a great website.
Yes.
What a great website. I just have to say, sorry to cut you off, but
yeah. Everyone check out courtsketch.com. They've got a bunch, this particular stuff is free, by the way. And, but there's a bunch of other stuff that is also paid. Well, you can take this one down. So yeah, these teams are basically throwing flames at each other in these small ball minutes without Rudy. And like I said, otherwise Minnesota is unable to score. If you could bring up the Jokic versus Wolves bench clips here. So this is another great kind of sequence from your article where it's just a sequence of plays where Denver is able to get whatever they want. In particular, Jokic is able to get whatever he wants against this small ball look here, because here again, it's just Julius. He's not fronting. I think he was doing a great job at making the catch that difficult for Jokic in that particular situation. And then Jokic is just able to drive on him downhill. I kind of surprised at how far up Julius was playing, but that's in part because of how good Jamal has been. And Julius isn't going to be great playing drop either. You can just keep letting the clips play from here. Will. I
would imagine. Yeah, I would imagine he's up too, because that's typically where Denver plays split action out of.
Yeah.
On some of these. So these catches where he's at the elbow, you almost want to be up in case somebody gets lost and there's an open 3-pointer. But yeah, I mean, look, most of this is single coverage. This is
creative angle for that entry pass, by the way. So kudos to Jamal on that one. We've seen a lot better, I think, entry passes from him recently, especially over the last month, against some of these more aggressive coverages the teams are employing.
Right.
And here in these small ball looks, Minnesota is being a lot more aggressive with their kind of bracketing of Jokic here, as opposed to kind of Rudy playing back in that drop. I mean, this was just out of after a timeout, just baseline out of bounds, backs up Julius, gets all the way to the rim. So even though Julius provides some resistance here, it's like, all right, you gotta live with the Jokic floaters because you don't want to get get torched to the tune of 130 offensive rating, right?
Right. Yeah, and
it's like actually that is the better option.
It is, but it's like the pressure is on Minnesota if they're allowing a 127 defensive rating, then you have to go have a 128 offensive rating on the other end, which is one of the many things, tough things about playing Denver. Yeah, look, a lot of this stuff is just too like, even if there's a front, and there isn't really much, there's no help behind it. Yeah. So it's just like, why is this a front with no help?
Stuff that Minnesota can definitely,
you know what I mean? Here. Like that to me is just like, I don't know what the goal is there. And that's a great pass over the top. So, look, he just has looked really comfortable. Here's Nas trying to guard him. I mean, and it's cool too watching Nikola because his footwork's so good. Sure, he's able to blow by these guys too, which is great.
That's the other thing with Julius, as opposed to not that Nas is not even the ideal for this either, but somebody that is a little bit more fleet of foot that could kind of stay in front of Jokic and kind of force him to stop a little bit shorter of getting all the way downhill to the basket. Well, if you could bring up the Nuggets targeting off ball, this is just a lot of examples of this. Matt, in your article, I didn't necessarily see you explicitly try to link the way that Denver targets certain players' kind of inattentiveness off ball to Minnie's small ball looks. But I feel like in a lot of these instances, that inattentiveness was a lot more costly when Rudy's off the floor, right? To kind of clean things up.
Yeah. I mean, you just can't have ball watching when you're small is kind of my general point. And it was funny watching everything back. A lot of these involve Naz Reid, but it really was everyone. I mean, there were so many instances where it's like, you're already at a size disadvantage. So you can't be caught all right, I'm gonna keep my eye on the ball. And again, a lot of this too is just how many split cuts have we looked at, right? This is, if you're not a necessarily super attentive on ball team by nature, somebody like OKC is a good example of that. Then Denver is just going to dice you up. They're going to find these holes in the defense with their split cuts, with their off ball actions, and they're going to get downhill for plays like this. So it's really kind of the magic of how many different ways they're going to play. I mean, look, we've seen Nikola playing out of the elbow. Here's him playing point guard with 5-out spacing.
To your point about it's not just the inattentiveness off ball, but the Minnesota's base kind of defensive scheme when they're playing small is going to be switching, which makes you a lot more susceptible to slips, which is where Great Denver point. Feasts, right? Where it's Great point. That's just the natural counter to the defense that you're playing when you play small. Right. So I actually wonder if Minnesota would play more zone in these looks. Potentially. I didn't see them play a lot of zone, not just against Denver, but generally when I've watched them this season. I don't know if that's something that they go to a lot. And if they do, it would be more with Rudy on the floor as a counter to something that the other team is doing, but not necessarily what they want to do when they play small.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go zone against Nikola. So it'd maybe be when he's off. I don't feel like I've seen that happen much ever. And when it does happen, it's okay, we'll just have Nikola flash, who's the league leading mid-range shooter, can find any pass in the book. But I do think when he's off and you're dealing with those lineups, that could be an option for you to do. It would be a surprising counter for me when Nikola's on. I think you'd be testing fate a little bit.
I just had one more example here of players getting targeted off ball with Rudy on the floor here. Will, if you could play the Yoke dunk off of the Cam pick and roll. And it's really pretty similar to what we were seeing with Jamal. as we wait for that one. So Cam is off ball. Then he's got Julius on him, runs into the handoff, and just kind of easily sets up Jokic for what I thought was going to be a floater, but ended up being a pretty thunderous dunk here. The other thing with the small ball looks is that they're another reason that they switch, as I alluded to earlier, is their drop defense just isn't particularly good. Well, if you could bring up the CB drive off the DHO again, this is in the non-Rudy minutes, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen Christian do that before, where he kind of crosses his defender over to kind of force him into a more compromised position around the screen, comes back around and drives all the way to the basket. And Julius is employing that coverage that Will and I have talked about so much since that 2024 series, where they ignore the guy with the ball and just stick with Jokic until it's too late. And if you've got somebody with the ball in their hands that is willing and able to take that ball all the way to the basket, you get a layup out of that. And we've seen that with Rudy. We've seen that with now Julius. We've seen that with other centers around the league as other teams. I think since that 2024 series, we see that a lot more, where Jokic is either kind of slow rolling or he's like popping out to the mid range, sometimes all the way back at the 3-point line. And the big is just like, nope, I'm staying right where I am. Right. And Christian was able to take advantage in that particular situation. Let's go to the Julian driving floater. So this one ended up being a miss here. And Minnesota decided to swarm Jokic's drive with all their guys. But I mean, this is still like good offensive process. Maybe you want Julian to just take the three here, but Denver's operating with, they're like, the defense is completely scrambled. At this point, they're just kind of praying that Denver misses here because they've got every advantage available on that possession. So this is just like more examples of like all of the reasons that maybe Finch doesn't want to go to these small ball looks too much, because really, if they're not scoring, it could get really ugly because of how Swiss cheesy they are on defense in all these different ways, and in particular against Denver with the way that they like to play offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think, it'll be, they're going to just have to experiment even more. I think a good example is like at the end of the Christmas game. This is mostly related to 2-man game, but they like defended with Ant and Jaden as the two guarding Nikola and Jamal, and they would try to switch it. So that strategy maybe didn't work. Like, I think that level of trying things will be required at certain points in this series.
And we know Minnesota's willing to do that because, to my chagrin, because as much as I was kind of personally hoping for a different matchup because I wanted to see Denver just play a different team in a playoff series, of the kind of repeats that were available, Minnesota is the one that gets the most creative, I should say, in the ways that they try to restrain Denver's offense. One note I wanted to play here in terms of a risk for Denver. Will, if you could bring up the Jokic turnover. It was after the Julian floater clip here. So I think this one was just a bad read on Jokic's part, but they're kind of like half zoning up here. Io reads the play and like Jokic doesn't quite see that like the corner is where he should be, like kind of getting the ball in that situation, kind of because Io's kind of half playing free safety and then he gets the ball here. There were a few more of these in these minutes than I wanted to see. And it was one of the reasons I was pretty surprised to see how well Denver was doing offensively against these Minnesota small ball looks. But these are the types of turnovers that lend themselves to being torched by Minnesota on the other end. Like that part of the reason that they are such a good offense in these lineups is that they are such a good transition offense. Minnesota ranks 7th in transition efficiency in their transition offense, which is, definitely a weak point for Denver, who ranks 23rd in their transition defense. So they really want to limit live ball turnovers and some of those bad misses at the rim that kind of leave the now you're transitioning back into defense and leave the floor balance in a bad place going the other way. That has to be a priority in those minutes, I think, if Denver is going to do more than just kind of tread water in those minutes. All right. We got a mailbag question here from BK having to do with how Denver should handle the Wolves bench lineups when Jokic is off the floor. BK says, I'm wondering if this matchup brings small ball center Jones, as in Spencer, or Big Val, and is there potentially a goal to keep AG's minutes to 35? So leading into what Denver's going to do against Minnesota's bench with Jokic off the floor, what do you think of this question with Denver's front court?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think Jonas has played really well. I like Jonas as a post-up threat against that small ball unit, especially when he's posting up Naz Reid or somebody like that. I think I had a couple clips in my article about that. So I would try that. But that's the beauty of kind of these last 2 months, is that we've seen Denver be able to do different things. Like, I felt like if they played Houston, that was going to be a huge JV series. I think this still absolutely can be. There's definitely spots for him to attack that. And again, force Minnesota's offense on the other end to execute by scoring on Denver's side of the ball, make them have to match your offensive rating essentially. But I also think we've seen like the nice part about this season, if you're going to find a silver lining of like guys being in and out and not really having a consistent rotation, is like, hey, maybe you don't figure out about this Spencer Jones at the 5 lineup that won you a game in San Antonio in the second half. Let's be honest, like, to me, that was the biggest reason why they won that game. I think that was without Wemby, that game, where they played Spencer at the 5. Yes. So that like is a great example of like, I don't know if you necessarily use that lineup in a normal setting, but now you have the option to, if you need to go there in this series. It's funny, like I feel kind of similarly about Minnesota. Like we haven't mentioned Kyle Anderson at all, and maybe we'll save this a little bit for how Denver guards Minnesota. But they have that option too, right? Like we haven't mentioned him once, and it's because he didn't play against Denver in the 4 games, but they have that look they can go to. That's kind of like their Spencer at the 5 lineup, for me at least.
So speaking of kind of wrapping up not wrapping up. We're talking a lot about Minnesota's front court because it's really like the thing that kind of forms the identity of this team outside of obviously Anthony Edwards, which we'll talk about more when we get to the defense section. But what do you think of a Rudy, Naz, Julius triple big lineup? This look has had 0 minutes against Denver in the regular season. They've only played 123 possessions this season, but in those limited minutes, they've got a plus 12 net rating, 131 offensive rating, 102 defensive rating, which is insane per cleaning the glass. And even last season, they only played 15 possessions of it. Are you surprised that Finch hasn't used that lineup more, given the weakness of their backcourt, and just kind of saying, like, let's just play all our best players that aren't Ant are in our front court, so let's play them all together and kind of go full Houston Rockets with it?
I hadn't thought about it. I mean, I saw the outline for this, so that was the first time I saw it, and I was
it wasn't.
I don't know how that would work.
I think I stole that question from one of my group chats where I'm like, oh yeah, like I haven't actually. I vaguely recall a Minnesota like beat writer talking about that as a thing that they would want to see this season earlier in the year, but it seems like that hasn't necessarily panned out, but in like a very limited way, which is surprising because, like I said, if Minnesota wanted to get all their best players on the floor at the same time, that would be the way to do it. And it seems like when they do, it's not like, oh, maybe it's good in theory, but like when the numbers bear out, like it hasn't been great, so that it got yanked. The numbers are fantastic. So I kind of wonder why not.
I think that's a tough lineup to go against a team that uses a lot of off-ball screens. Like I'm trying to figure out who's getting through, and maybe you're just switching everything, which is fine. Cause like all right, let me think about how that it would probably
be like Ant,
Nicola
and Jaden, and then
Well, I'm just thinking about who those three would be guarding. Like if it's probably a lineup you're going to play with your starters since two of them are in there. So I guess Nas is on Cam in that scenario. And that feels like
Denver would play Cam at the 2. And go.
I mean, they crash.
Peyton?
They crash a lot. Like I would just think it's mostly they're just going to try to like maximize possessions on the other end, right? Like they'd be trying to just rebound.
Because otherwise, I don't really like. I know they have a good offensive rating, but against Denver or any team that's really trying to scheme against it, I really don't like it. For Minnesota's offense.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either.
Yeah.
But I get kind of what the goal is, right? Is to just try to maximize possessions, because that's a lot of playing Denver to me, is like, can you win the possession battle? So and how do you do that? Well, can you get turnovers? Can you do something like offensive rebound more? Does that work? I mean, it doesn't always. I've seen Houston win the rebounding battle in certain games and it has not happened. But I would think that's kind of what you're thinking with that lineup, is literally just, can we get more possessions at that point and just try to give us more chances on offense, and see what we can get. I guess I don't know, but it would be cool. It would surprise me to see. And I think that's a real like foxhole adjustment. Like you're down, I don't know, 2-1 and you're on the road or I guess you're at home for Minnesota, game 4. And you're like, all right, we're down 15 in the third quarter. Like, let's just try this, I guess. I don't know. Right. Like we'll just throw it out there. So, that's probably when I see that adjustment happening, but it's interesting. It just hasn't happened at all. Cause I would think that's a lineup you need a lot of reps to figure out, because you're basically playing three front court players together. So
it's kind of a big thing to kind of just throw out there without having really run those reps. But you never know what can happen when a team gets desperate in a series.
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about how Jamal in particular can handle Minnesota's small ball looks. Wasn't one of the things that stood out in the film is how effective switching was against Jamal. Sometimes with I think often with Jokic off the floor, but so it was a lot in the bench lineups, whether Denver was going small or not. Minnesota was gonna kind of be dedicated to that switching in those Julius Nas lineups. Well, if you could bring up let's go to the Jamal blocked floater first. So this was like an end of half possession with Jokic on the floor. So they run pick and roll. Minnesota ends up switching. They actually end up kind of I forgot the word. Not pre-rotating. They swiped him out. They
that's a scram switch.
Yes, scram switch. Thank you. Scram
switch.
Scram Jaden out of there. And then Nas was still able to recover and block this. And we're gonna see in this and like a couple of other clips that whenever Jamal tries to get downhill against switching, it doesn't really go well against this team. Let's go to the Jamal nitty miss over Io. Another kind of thing here I was watching the film is like, how has Jamal dealt with Io DeSumo? We actually got an okay sample size of that. I think we had 2 games, maybe it was just 1 game post trade deadline with Jamal against Io, but he spent a lot of time on him. Gets downhill. This is a makeable shot for Jamal, but it's probably not the best one. He's not able to get like a full get all the way downhill on here because of how high up Julius is playing in his drop, and Jokic wasn't popped all the way out to 3 at the time, so Jamal didn't think to get him the ball there. Just kind of clunky results in this shot, right? And then let's go to the Jamal missed midi. A lot of these are named very similarly. I apologize, Will. So you've got he's got Ant on him, and then Julius was on Jokic, and they switched that. This is at the end of a quarter, and then he gets kind of ends up having to take a midi because it's late clock, and Ant does an okay job of just like Jokic is unavailable for like a quick pass here. And again, it's late clock, so Minnesota is going to have an advantage defensively, just period, in that situation. Right. But against those switches, whenever Jamal tried to get downhill or when it was pick and roll with Jokic and Jokic wasn't popping, or when he was rolling in like any kind of way, even if it wasn't all the way downhill, things just got really mucked up for Jamal, and he either had to make a tough shot or just like ended up, missing it there. Let's go to the last one here, which I think is like the first example of like the correct process, but it results in a miss against these more aggressive coverages. If you could go to the Jamal miss on the drive. So here he's being guarded. I think that's Jalen Clark with Julius on Jokic. So this isn't a switch situation, but it's against the small ball, and Julius is fronting here, and Jamal does the thing where Jokic is being fronted, so he uses the whole thing as just a giant screen. Like, good luck, Jalen Clark, getting around that. And he has a layup available. It's contested but makeable. That's like a shot that I would prefer to some of the jump shots that we saw in prior clips. But yeah, whenever the downhill stuff ends up being a little bit more difficult against these small ball lineups when Nas or Julius are not in a drop, whenever they're playing these more aggressive coverages against the pick and roll or against the handoff game. What I did find, though, is that some of the best, I think, counters to the switching ended up having to do with Jamal's willingness and skill as a 3-point shooter. Will, if you could go to the Jamal 3 over Rudy. So in this is not in overtime, but in the clutch in that Christmas game, I believe. They end up. This was actually a clip from your article where Tim sets an initial screen for Jamal to get the DiVincenzo switch on him. And I've seen lots of teams just decide, we don't care, we're not giving you that switch. But because Tim is the 3-point shooter that he is, they have to be like, okay, Ant, just go, like, guard him, like, don't just let him drift off to the corner and be open for a 3, because that's also a shot that Denver would like in that situation. DiVincenzo, just do your best here. And after that, they end up in probably a miscommunication situation. Well, if you just let that play again, where he's like, okay, I'm going to kind of bad veer switch to Jokic, and now it's up to Rudy to try to figure this out. But it feels like whenever Jamal and Jokic play this 2-man game where they're kind of alternating where they're popping out to 3, they have a lot more space to play with, and there's a lot more, I think, room for miscommunications of the defense that are costly just because of the ground that the 2 defenders that are trying to guard them 2-on-2 have to cover in that situation. I
like that play because you can see Jamal almost push, like, I guess, screen Dante and Rudy.
Yeah.
See, like, when you see this, like,
we just saw Steph do this the other night.
This is now turned into a triple screen for Nikola.
Yeah.
somehow, which is great. And then he pops, and that's Jamal doing his work early, because he almost pushes Dante into Rudy, and now it's like there's two guys trying to figure out a way to get around that screen. So yeah, just a subtle counter from Jamal, and a good screen. That there's just a lot of those this year from Denver. Good screeners. Been saying since the beginning of the year.
And then the last one that I've got here is the Jamal 3 versus switching. Everyone's like, what are these? Like, what are you calling these? These are just what I named the clips, very unhelpfully named for Will to put them, to bring them up during the show. Again, you got Ant on Jamal. Originally, when I put my notes together, I had a lot of like how Jamal does versus not Ant, and how Jamal does versus Ant, where really the main differentiator in how I think effective Jamal was as an on-ball scorer, or just a scorer generally on a possession, was more separated in this particular matchup by whether he started on ball or off ball, and then his 3-point willingness. So in this particular possession, again, it's Jamal comes in, he stays on ball for this possession here. They're switching between Jaden and Ant. I think this was in overtime after Rudy had fouled out, so they put Jaden on Jokic so that they could try to switch all of these actions. But again, there's a lot more miscommunication that is easily punished because of all the space that Jamal's able to operate with when he's playing behind the 3-point line. And as this team's clear best 3-point shooter, I think that we need to see a lot more of that from him, in particular in this series, and just kind of be like, all right, everybody else, you guys go score on the interior. I'm going to try to make your jobs easier by being the threat that I am from the outside. And it also makes his job easier, in my opinion.
Yeah. That was the adjustment I was talking about earlier, with Jaden and Ant involved, and giving those two a lot of space that Jamal quickly eats up. There's just a lot of space between Nikola and Jaden, and again, part of that is because they have to switch back and forth, but it doesn't feel like a very physical possession from Minnesota. If you're going small like that, I would think you'd want to be a little more physical there, and kind of grab onto guys a little bit if you can, which you can do, especially in playoffs. So yeah, but that, I mean, Jamal's 3-point shot and Nikola's, but Jamal's is really probably the biggest reason why the Nuggets are the 3 seed, have had the best offense in franchise history. I really think that shot has just been a defining shot for the Nuggets this year. That pull-up 3, it's just been huge at so many points of the year, and I think that's a great example.
All right, so I want to move on to the defense against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I want to start off with some pretty annoying clips, I would say, for somebody that is rooting for the team, before we move on to what Denver can kind of do to counter some of the, I think, clear like weaknesses they're going to have in this matchup on that end of the floor. So similarly to all the ways that Denver, frustrates the Minnesota defense, I think that the Minnesota has a few pretty clear advantages in this matchup, if assuming that Denver didn't make any changes here, and chief of them is Anthony Edwards being as athletic and skilled of a driver as he is. Well, if you could bring up the 2 drives here where Ant is being guarded by Christian Braun, these aren't actually this is Ant coming from off ball. DHO gets all the way downhill. It's very like, oh, wait, was that Jamal Murray running Chicago with Nikola Jokic? No, it was Anthony Edwards. And this is something that if you squint and look at like certain possessions, some like a segment of Minnesota Timberwolves possessions, you'd think you were looking at the Denver Nuggets offense, which is the funny thing, because on the whole, it's like, no, these teams play so differently from each other. But some of the things that frustrate Denver the most are when Minnesota decides to play like them. And Will, if you could also go to that second one here too. let's see, similar situation where Ant is coming from off ball. And Christian just kind of gets caught like again, because of just the positioning of like him relative to Jokic, and Ant's able to get all the way downhill. So Anthony Edwards is going to be a problem for Denver in this series. Will, you could bring up the zone defense clips first, and then I will let Matt take over from here, because I think that is kind of where the answer starts. If the question is like, how is Denver going to deal with this team?
For sure. I mean, so we'll start here. Like, Denver obviously was a pretty zone heavy team last year in the postseason, especially when they played OKC. They play a dominant downhill guy in SGA. And this is another really dominant downhill guy in Anthony Edwards, does a lot of his work in isolations, pick and rolls. And this is a way to take a team out of that, at least for a little bit, right? Like, and I think, I don't know if we're going to go through this, but yeah, there are adjustments that Minnesota can make. And we saw those, but this was from the second game of the year, I believe, in November, where first quarter.
Yeah, it was really like, I love their Prince Night theme. I love all the sounds that the kind of that come out whenever a basket is made. I was like, damn, this is thematically pretty elite, and it kind of pisses me off that the Timberwolves do it.
That's funny. It's those are great jerseys. Those are such cool jerseys. Purple is like a cool color. Like, I guess Toronto has that. Anyways, I'm gonna go off on a tangent about this. The zone is definitely a look I think we'll see from Denver. To me, it really threw Minnesota off from a decision-making perspective, where it just took them a second to be like, okay, what are we running? Like, this is just kind of like a pass of like, all right, I guess I'll get it to Jaden here at the elbow. And it just took them a second. Again, this is a Timberwolves team that was on a back-to-back. So really smart adjustment to start a game this way and test the team's focus right like that. But the other thing that it does is it got the ball in Rudy's hands in the open floor, which will be a big theme for Denver, has been for a couple years now, of can we find ways to make him make decisions from about, the free throw line and try to create from there, right? He's not a guy that's necessarily going to be taking floaters or anything like that. And so it worked in that way. They're fine with that, right? Like, all right, if Rudy's going to get the ball in, at about the free throw line, well, Minnesota has to improvise kind of around that. Julius tries to cut here, and it's actually a really good cut, just great anticipation from AG to steal that ball. But that's the type of stuff you have to run. And they did adjust, right? There are adjustments that you can make. They did it in that game. They did things like overload the side of the ball.
Just to help you out here, Will, if you could pull up the zone counters clips here.
Yes. So I got to see which one is this? This one is
passing the ball around
side to side. Yeah, side to side movement. That's one of them for sure. I think the one that I really remember was the clip where, and it might be in this video, maybe not. But basically they overloaded the side of the ball, and they brought, I think it was maybe Naz Reid to the corner, and then they had Dante at the wing, and it just put more guys on the side of the ball than there were zone defenders. So it was like 3 guys on the left side of the floor, 2 guys in the zone, and they just found the guy in the corner. So those are the type of counters I think you can do. Kind of working out of those zone looks, and Minnesota
just kind of weaponizing the weak side effectively is essentially like how you attack this, because the weak side it's called the weak side for a reason.
Yes. Right? Yeah. Right. You're correct. And
whether it's cutting, getting the ball over there for shooting, even like attacking, like attacking the gaps from those positions, just you've caught the defense with their pants down, and you gotta drive
for sure.
basket.
And I think that's where like some of their new additions are really helpful. Like Io is a really good player on what's called those stampede cuts, where he's already catching and cutting. So, getting yourself moving before you're even catching is a great way to kind of pierce the zone. I think Kyle Anderson could be somebody. He didn't have a huge role in the last Timberwolves Nuggets series, but he strikes me as somebody, hey, maybe we go small and put him at the 5, and then he's flashing to the middle of the zone, and he's got that little floater, that like funny little slow-mo floater, and he's also probably their best passer. So maybe that's our kind of adjustment to that. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can do the same thing that I just described with Io, with Ant, where he's stampede catching and trying to pierce into the zone. I also just feel like players don't drive enough into the zone. That's like a weird ick I have. Maybe ick is not the word, but yeah, I think there are opportunities to do that too. But yeah, I mean, look, there's things you're going to do. The point of a zone really is not that you're going to play it for 48 minutes, but more so like, hey, it's a change-up pitch. I'm not the first to say that. I won't be the last. It's something that you throw out to take a team out of whatever mode they're in, especially if they're scoring a lot in isolation, a lot in pick and roll. Well, now you have to rethink and recalibrate, and that's where something like this can be effective. So yeah, good adjustment by Denver. Really interesting to see them start a game that way. I think that's pretty uncommon. I don't remember a lot of instances where they began games like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot more since Adelman took over, for sure. Like we saw it. I remember just to my chagrin in the playoffs, I think game 1 against the Clippers, I was like, what are they doing? Maybe it was more like the execution of what was going on, but I felt like Denver was more confused than the Clippers were to start that particular game. But to your point, situationally, especially like good pointing out that it was a back-to-back for the Wolves, and like the Wolves are kind of prone to just kind of being like a little bit slower to process at like in the aggregate as an offense. So just kind of like making them think for a little bit more and get them out of what they want to do early in a game, I think is situationally was pretty smart there. I'm curious to see what Denver comes out in terms of their base defensive scheme in game 1 tomorrow. Me for too. Sure. Your article, you also talk a bit about the role of like Jokic hedging, and in particular that effect on Ant. So again, encourage everybody to check out that series preview before the series starts, but also like during it. Like I like going back and checking out things after a series starts and being like, oh, this person like 100% understood exactly where the battlegrounds were in this one. All right. Before you go, I wanted to get to one last question here, which has to do with the series X factors. We got a mailbag from Mile High Z over on Twitter, who asks, who is the biggest swing factor in the series for both teams? I'm going to let Matt start, and then I'll give mine.
So I did this in my article. So I'm going to repeat it. I don't know. X factor is like kind of, in theory, it means like you don't know what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
And it's weird for Denver's. Maybe it's not really an X factor because I kind of trust that that's going to be there. But I think like this is more so just a general point I want to make about the playoffs. Like Nikola's his mid-range shot is, to me, in the same way that Jamal's pull-up 3 was the regular season defining shot, I think that mid-range shot is the defining shot for Denver in this playoff run. And you saw it so much against Minnesota this year. He's just taking middies over Rudy, where Jamal and Nikola might go to pick and roll with Nikola actually rolling instead of popping out to the 3. And Nikola just stops his roll at about the elbow and pulls up for that mid-range jumper. There was some plays, I think in the Christmas game maybe, where he hit like a step back mid-range jumper out of a face up. That shot will be so important against Oklahoma City, like so important. And I really saw it. That's probably and I don't know if it's an X factor because I trust it, right? But it is the most important shot for Denver. X factor against Minnesota. Outside of that, I don't know.
I name
think
one player. It could be like a thing, like a trait of their team, or like a variable of their team.
I think it's a big series for Julian Strawther. I think it's a really big series. Just like he's so important for this team, especially with, the injuries that they're kind of going through, as a guy who can get downhill and play fast. He's just a really good athlete. Like, he really stands out. So I will probably say he is a really intriguing name for me in this series, to kind of see what that looks like against another athletic team. So I'll probably list him. And then I guess on Minnesota's side, we're going to go back to the front court. We're going to do it again. But I think the Julius at 5 lineups, and I wrote about this a lot in my article. The 3-point shot for Julius is the single most important shot for Minnesota in this series and onward. If he has a good shooting series, because he's going to get these driving lanes when Minnesota is 5 out. They're going to be there because they have such good spacing with their bench unit. But part of that is he has to be a contributor to that spacing. He has to knock down his pick and pops when it's him and Ant going to those looks, or whoever he's out there with. If he shoots the 3 ball really well, I think that is how you at least come out to like a net neutral with the bench, especially when Nicola's on. If not, you're winning those minutes. And again, that great website that you brought up earlier, like, I think when you look at Minnesota's offense, Court Sketch, thank you. I'm going to check that out after this. I might go back into my article and go edit that and add some of those stats in there. Court Sketch pointed out that those Randle at the 5 lineups were productive, and it wasn't necessarily because of their defensive rating. It was because their offense was so good. And some of that was just he shot the 3 ball pretty well. So that's probably my 2 X factors.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with you that Julius is Minnesota's biggest X factor. And similarly, like, X to X factor is weird because you kind of know what you're getting with Julius. But I think defensively could be a big series for him because of what we talked about. Like, if there's any kind of I think uptick in the defensive productivity or impact of those small ball looks, it's a much tougher series for Denver, because so far they're just kind of able to like barely tread water against those lineups and just kind of beat up on everything else involving Rudy, because the offense is so much worse than Denver's offense is as a team when Rudy is on the floor. But if those small ball looks are able to sort of competently guard Denver, just be a little bit more attentive, clean up those details, and Julius is going to be part of that, I think that could be a really big swing for Minnesota in this series. For Denver, my biggest non-injury related X factors, I think that Denver still has a lot of question marks when it comes to their front court, is Tim Hardaway Jr. And I wanted to show just a couple clips of some of the biggest non-3-point shot making, which is he's been incredible this whole season. He was particularly incredible against Minnesota in the regular season series. Really hope that keeps up in the come playoff time. But Will, if you could bring up the Tim nitty off of the Jonas front. So this is a play that I think exemplifies what Denver needs from their role players, or just their non-Jamal perimeter players in this series, is to kind of mimic some of the things that he's able to do to counter what Minnesota's doing. Jonas is getting fronted, uses it out of screen, gets an open midi, knocks it down. Let's go to the Tim Hezzy to the rim. Here you've got running a handoff with Jokic, who pops out to 3. Rudy is pretending to guard Tim for a second and then decides, nope, I'm sticking with Jokic, and Tim is able to get all the way downhill to the rim. Love this play. And then the Tim floater next. Again, handoff, aggressively gets all the way downhill to get this open shot. Rudy on the floor. Rudy stays with Jokic again. And these are the kinds of things that Denver needs to do to punish these ridiculous gimmick coverages that Minnesota is bound to employ in this series. And then the last one is the Tim driving layup. So Denver is gonna run. Well, they want to run split action here, but his cut kind of gets cut off by Conley, and he just runs into the handoff, gets all the way downhill, punishes a bad defender on the floor. And it's beautiful stuff. It's like, this is like everything that only Jamal was doing in the last series. And unfortunately, he was so physically hampered that it wasn't at the level that, that needed to be done. And now we have potentially, hopefully, more players that can do it. But I think in addition to, again, the 3-point shot, this is like where he just has a little bit more of a bag than I think people are expecting. Tim is a really big swing for Denver in this series.
Yep. And another guy who you can play in similar sets as Jamal. Like, you can run Chicago. You can test some of these Wolves off-ball defenders.
And it keeps you from having to kind of resort to Jokic volume post-ups when you have other players that can kind of do exactly what you're talking about as well.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We could honestly talk for several hours more if you had the time, or if I had the time, frankly. But we got to let Matt go. He's got very important Nuggets business to attend to. But if there's anything that you want to plug before you head out, just let our audience know where they can find your stuff.
No, this is like the most plug heavy episode ever. Like, I feel like we got it every 10 minutes. We were like, here's great. Matt's Twitter. Here's Matt's article, which is great. So thank you for that. I don't have anything to plug. Go follow the Nuggets, my employer. That's a good one. We'll be doing a lot of stuff kind of throughout the playoffs. If you enjoy my stuff, my film work, there's going to be a lot of that. There will be articles. There will be Nuggets knowledges in the playoffs, which is fun. Short form videos. I'm excited. This is it. This is the part of the season I live for. And these series previews are a good start, and it feels right to start off the playoffs with you guys, right? Like, we're going in breaking down film. It's like we picked off right from last year. So yeah, thank you for having me on. And go subscribe to this podcast. I'll do that for you since you plugged me a bunch. That's great. I listen to the show a lot. Yeah. And always fun to talk about the details with you guys. It's always a good time.
Thank you. All right. Now we are going to transition over to the second half here. Matt, you can go ahead and just log out as I try to get Will back on here so we can continue on.
I'll make it easy.
Review. Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for having me. See you guys.
All right. Now, if I could get the floating voice of Will. Oh, he's back. Where am I? Okay. Am I there? Okay. Can everybody hear me? We're just going to just get the chat to confirm everybody's audio is good. Okay. Awesome. Love having Matt on the show. Seriously. He's like the biggest nerd about the Denver Nuggets, which is a good thing to be when you write about the team 80 plus times a year. 100 plus times a year, because he does tons of stuff in like playoffs and summer and in the off season and things like that. But that's really great. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the defense stuff that we didn't necessarily have time for with Matt on here before we moved on to the next segment. We got a question from Dylan Lynch over on Twitter, who asked, who guards Randle? That is one strong man. I agree, Dylan. Or sorry, not Dylan. Daniel Lynch. Dan. I always want to call you Dylan Lynch. That is one strong man. And I agree. One of the biggest questions that I have going into the series is whether Denver will have the bodies available to guard Randle. Yes, Yeaman, Will is free. Will has been freed from.
Don't worry, I wasn't not free.
Free Willy, yes, has been freed from his producer prison.
I like that.
Producer prison, you like that?
Yeah.
if you could bring up the clips of Jones versus Randle. So this is actually from Matt's article. Just a good, I think a decent compilation of Spencer being a bit stronger on Julius Randle than I realized. I know Spencer's pretty strong. He's got a good base, but Julius Randle is, I think people underestimate how strong Julius Randle is. One of the games that made me really appreciate this, like his strength as a player, not despite his size, because he is still a big guy, but I feel like he has the strength of like a near 7-footer, despite only being like 6'8", 6'9". But one of the games that really kind of drove home to me how like just strong, like I don't have another word for it, Julius Randle was when he was still with the Knicks. It was right after the OG Anunoby trade, and they had this big kind of blowout win against the Milwaukee Bucks that year, like a couple weeks after the OG trade. And Randle was repeatedly going at Giannis for post ISOs, which is like maybe not the smartest offense in the world. However, he was scoring on Giannis every single time, getting deep position on these shots, sometimes getting all the way to the basket, but often just kind of getting to that like short, like post kind of fadeaway jumper. But in the process, like moving Giannis several feet in the course of things. And I was like, whoa, that's Julius Randle, right? And then if you could bring up the Gordon versus Randle clips next, that's AG. And, you know, I know we have like a couple guys who can, you know, at least plausibly guard Julius one-on-one, which is the primary way that Julius likes to attack. We talked about his role in the flow of the Wolves offense, more off ball, more pick and pops and spot ups as in this particular possession. But he does like to attack one-on-one quite a bit. Sometimes turns a spot up into like more of an isolation possession, sometimes just because of how he likes to work a bit more methodically. So you need guys to be able to really guard him, because he's not a player that like doesn't know his strength, for example, right? Like he's a big body and he knows it and he uses that. But we have no idea at this point in time on Friday at now 3:09 Mountain Time PM whether Spencer Jones is going to be available for game one. It sounds like from the chatter that Peyton Watson is not going to be available for at least game one. With Spencer, it sounds like there's still a chance, but I would not count on it, because at this point it's kind of like, well, it's the day before, either you know or you don't. So I have no idea who's going to be guarding Julius when AG is off the floor, or if we're just going to match AG to Julius's minutes, which could set up like an interesting potential conundrum for Denver with their rotations.
Yeah, I mean, we just have such lack of depth at the forward spot, which is why I really hope Spencer is back. And there are offensive limitations, obviously, with how we will attack them with Spencer on the floor. And he's going to have to, that's going to be a quick learning curve, like throwing him in sink or swim situation. But that's okay. Like, I'd rather him be out there to guard, like in these scenarios for sure. But as the chat's been pointing out, not having Cat, like I would be much worried about Cat in this series, I think, in this situation, like with the Nuggets injuries. But like mirroring AG to Julius wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, though it definitely sucks to not have AG out there in the non-Jokic minutes. So Julius just playing without Jokic, and then AG's having
that's
to play
a good point,
sucks.
because there will definitely be some non-Jokic minutes where Rudy's on the floor.
They've tried to do that a lot in the past.
But they definitely did that in some of these games, because you're playing Randle a lot because he's starting and he's playing these like small ball minutes against Jokic. He's not going to be in all of the non-Jokic minutes anyway. And I kind of want, like, I almost think it's more important to have AG on the floor in the non-Jokic minutes than Jamal, although you'd want both. just from the lineup data in this matchup. And part of it is just like the drop off when AG's off the floor because of the lack of depth of that power forward spot. It's tough. It's tough, man.
Mm-hmm.
We got another mailbag question from Jakir at Reculent on Twitter. Jakir asks, if the Nuggets make short work of the Wolves, so I assume you mean the series ends in 4 or 5, what will have been the factor? For me, it's that the shooting that they had in the regular season holds in the playoffs, and they don't turn the ball over. Like, I think if Denver is truly at a point where they can win the series with offense, period, I think they can win it in 5. But if it turns into a defensive slugfest for any significant portion, it becomes a lot more murky. Yeah.
I think it's like Jokic's 3 is really on fire because he can punish them. And then Murray being able,
that just
like you guys were talking about.
If Jokic's 3 is on to the point that Minnesota has to change what they're doing defensively, that really kills them, I think. Because it means that I don't know. If Jokic's 3 is on, maybe they're like, well, there's literally no point in playing Rudy, so they just play all their 5 out lineups, which is how Minnesota can try to. It was like playing those lineups more is how Minnesota can try and tread water in the series. It's almost like it's kind of frustrating, this matchup, because the more I look into the film and the data and everything, I'm like, man, Denver does so many things really well in this matchup. Like, there are certain things that they do at like such an elite level that they can play Minnesota out of presenting us with the thing that lets us operate at the peak. So I'm like, I don't want to play Rudy off the floor in the Jokic lineups, because that means more time for Rudy in the non-Jokic minutes, which is bad for us. I don't want, maybe I don't want Minnesota to become so worried about Jokic's 3-point shot that they chuck Rudy out the window and they start playing their small ball looks more. So it's like, well, we're just switching everything anyway. And then that's much more difficult for Denver defensively. It's kind of like, it's annoying. The more I look into it, the more it makes sense why these games, and I think exemplified by the series in 2024, are like just both teams going on, like taking turns going on massive runs in ways you're like, whoa, what just happened? Because the effectiveness of these different adjustments against each other and like counter adjustments is like so high that it becomes like, just this like weird, like the opposite of a slugfest, but then it like nets out to a slugfest, if that makes sense.
And everyone labels the Wolves as more of a defensive team for sure, because that's been their strength of late, though they're not as good defensively as when we played
but then
them
they're
in that
offensively
series.
Like they're a problem for Denver.
Yeah,
so it's
but
like,
I think the advantage is definitely with us on the offensive end. And I know it's kind of funny because we've talked about the Nuggets being like their defensive strategy is outscoring people, and we'd rather just actually get some stops. But I really do think like if they limit mistakes, don't turn it over, we have been a really hot 3-point shooting team. And like I trust our ability to make shots, and especially with Jamal making tougher shots. Like I don't want to rely on that, but like you and Matt were talking about, like if Jamal can just get a little bit more space, drag out actions a little bit more with his, the fact that he's healthy and looking good. Like we just have such an advantage to like, if we just play our game, which I feel like we have more options to do that on offense, especially. Like we will just win the series, like regardless of us not handling the Wolves defensively as well. But yeah, there are things we have to do on defense for sure. But I just like our ability to like force the issue on offense. So
I mean, that's the other thing though, is like if Denver's defense shows up with any kind of like if it shows any signs of life, frankly, this could be a short series, like a really short series, because if you do that and you're not turning the ball over, even if the shooting doesn't necessarily hold, our offense is insane. Like, oh, we go down to like a 125 offensive rating with Jokic on the floor. Okay. But then we have like a competent defense on top of that. Like that could be a real problem for Minnesota. Like if we somehow, I talked about how, the small ball looks being decent defensively for Minnesota being a swing factor in this series. If Denver finds a way to limit those lineups to average offense, it's curtains, because that's basically the only, if you look at the data, that's the only lifeline that Minnesota has had against Denver this year, is those small ball Julius at the 5 lineups, and it's because of their offense. So if Denver can, you could, like I talked about the offense being the reason that it could be a short series, but you could see if Denver could specifically figure out how to hold those lineups to average offense. Minnesota doesn't really have anything else for Denver. Like I just feel like in the Jokic minutes anyway, we figured out how to deal with Rudy. In the bench minutes, you just kind of like live with getting killed there, because you hope that the Jokic on, minutes can net out to be positive enough. And like the data shows like that they have, even with the Minnesota small ball lineups kind of giving them a lifeline.
Yeah.
If I'm Minnesota, the way I look at this is my path to victory in this series is try to get Denver down to like a 120 offensive rating with your small ball looks, and then stay hot in the way that you are and just take advantage of like Denver's limitations defensively, guarding 5 out. And then try to like maximize the damage that Rudy does to the bench lineups, which we didn't get to talk about with Matt, but that is a real problem for Denver in this series, especially if we're going to be missing Peyton and Spencer for chunks of it, or maybe potentially even the whole series. Like we don't actually know when these guys are coming back. I didn't prioritize it as a discussion point though, because we know that there are just going to be fewer bench minutes in the playoffs, and it's going to matter. Like, can we get close to treading water in those minutes? Sure. But I was more interested in what Minnesota could do to blunt the positive impact of Jokic on. And it seemed like their only solution to that was really small ball. And when you get to a point where it's like, this is our only viable look, I think that's when you get kind of backed into a corner as a team. And so as pessimistic as like pessimistic realism, I guess, that I wanted to approach this series with, I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like Denver can and should win this. And for me, it's more a matter of like, can they do it quickly? And like, I don't know, especially with the injuries. But even when I was watching a lot of Wolves podcasts, like the most optimistic ones are like Wolves in 6 or 7. Like nobody thinks that Minnesota can win this in a short period of time. So that just kind of tells you more about like where kind of everyone thinks the margin of error lies in this series. And it feels like most people think it's with Denver, but yeah, like it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. I feel like media is picking Nuggets in like 6 or 7. And
I mean,
the Wolves
the media has
and
picked
Wolves
against
media.
the Wolves every first round for the last, well, probably 4 years, including when they actually lost against Denver. But they've been wrong the last 2, when they played the Suns and then the Lakers last year. So like, I don't care about the national media, but it seems like even Wolves media are kind of like, yeah, Minnesota can win this series.
Mm-hmm. The odds are also heavily in the Nuggets' favor if you care about that, which I don't. But I just think there's signs.
What was it? What was it in 24? I feel like it was close, but Denver was still on top in the betting odds or whatever.
I don't remember.
I feel like it's strange that like Vegas seems to do a better job when it comes to predicting our regular season stuff, even though there's so much more noise in the regular season than the playoff series.
Yeah.
But that's just Denver specific.
Do we have a question about if we lose a series? I think we talked about that last week. But we don't have to talk about it super long.
Okay, let's look if we'll probably let me see. Let me just check out the series schedule actually real quick here while we're here.
It's like Saturday, Monday, Thursday, and then it repeats like
they play on
Saturday,
Thursday?
Monday, Thursday. I think
we might have to do another Friday show next week.
Yeah, we might have to.
That'll be game. That's at Minnesota. So that's after game 3. Okay. If Denver is down in the series after game 3, then we'll talk about that next show. Otherwise, it'll have to wait.
Okay.
Until we get more information.
I can't wait to see how we look against them tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, so I had a couple more clip things that I want to talk about here. I'm talking about Jamal kind of getting downhill. We had some clips that alluded to it, especially off of like Denver goes to a Chicago action as their like initial a lot, just as a team, not just against Minnesota, where, you know, he's coming off of these off-ball pin downs and running into a handoff. And it's just like, it's funny because it's not pick and roll, but I think it kind of like diminishes Jamal's like pick and roll numbers in the stats, because those possessions that are handoffs don't get counted as, even though they're like effectively pick and roll. But I get why it's not counted as that, because it is a little bit easier for all the reasons that we talked about. Well, if you could pull up the Jamal Hezzy layup here. This was, I think, so Jamal puts Ant into the action here, or he has an Ant on him. And again, so here it's not Rudy making the decision. Well, he does make the decision, but it's not, it's Jamal kind of initiating here. If you watch Jamal's gaze, he acts like he's going to get Jokic the ball here. Ant's in terrible position, by the way. If Jokic was really like rolling hard downhill, Rudy would not have been able to recover. But yeah, he freezes Rudy, acts like he's going to get Jokic the ball, and then gets all the way downhill for this great lefty layup, right? And it's just like, one of the things I hated about reviewing film for this matchup was like, Ant like was not really that effective overall, especially as an on-ball defender. And like, we know his limitations off ball. Like he can be a little bit more inattentive, totally expected from a player with the kind of offensive burden that he has. But even on ball is like, he could be so much better than this, and I expect him to be a lot better than this in the playoffs. So I'm kind of like, it almost felt like there was more upside for Minnesota watching these games than there was for Denver, which, I mean, that's what you'd expect when you're looking at like one team won the season series 3-1, right? Let's go to the Jamal floating bank shot as well. So in this one, you've got Jaden on Jamal chasing again over all these off-ball screens, and he gets all the way downhill. Nas is trying to play drop, but he's just too small to like make an impact in that role, and Jamal's unfazed and goes to an easy floater. This is not a bank shot. I don't know why I called it a bank shot, but and then this was one I remember actually clipping when we covered this game in the regular season. If you bring up, this floater out of double drag. So Tim comes off a pin down, and he's going to get, he was going to get the ball from Jamal. And I know that because they run this set so often, but I think is that Dillingham or Terrence Shannon? Anyway, DiVincenzo tries to deny Tim, doesn't work. So Tim goes to set a screen for Jamal, and it just turns into a double drag, and Jamal's able to get all the way downhill with Rudy on the floor, and hit like, it's not a layup, but like close to layup efficiency type shot with how close Jamal's able to get to the basket. Right.
Yeah. I just feel like Jamal in any screening action versus the Wolves is so much better. And just so much easier. And I really do want to see how the Wolves handle it. I mean, they're a good screen navigating team. So I want to see it. And this play in particular had Val, which I don't know if this is like a huge Val series. It could be because they have big, front court. It'd be limited minutes.
That they need to play Val in those Rudy minutes when Jokic is off the floor, because I don't think there's any point whatsoever. Like, Rudy destroys the AG at center lineups anyway. Our expert says, I've got Nuggets in 4. Don't see Minnesota winning. They're a bad team, and Christian will lock up. All right, that's a provoking
bad.
I don't think Ray means that.
I think he does.
That's a troll. That's a trolling message. Poppin says they better win in 4. Okay. All right, guys. They didn't even win in 4 in 2023 when Minnesota was heavily injured and was playing Taurean Prince significant playoff rotation minutes. So let's just, maybe you can say like Denver's better now, but Denver's also way more injured than they were that year. So I think that part evens out.
Well, I just wanted to say quick, I think Val versus Rudy in some non-Jokic minutes could be good. Like, he could score. And I think that's a lot of the problem with the bench minutes for sure. But also Val's a good screener. So he could get like our other guys downhill, like in those minutes too. And I think that's going to be important, is freeing up anyone, like whether it's Jamal, if he's not playing those minutes, or like Julian or anyone, just to like get off an action and try to get in the paint. And if you can kick out from that or get a look, that'll be great. But I know the bench minutes always suck with Jokic, but it's one option to kind of like just make the negative minutes less negative than they would be otherwise.
I'm looking at the those Wowie combos for Jokic, AG, and Val against Minnesota. Just to get an idea. I was looking at this yesterday too, but I didn't include it in the notes. Yeah, the thing is, when you've got Val on without AG, it's terrible. But when you got Val on with AG against Minnesota, it's good. And I think that was all against Rudy. Like, good, like above average offense, really good defense kind of thing, right? I mean, the effective field goal percentage isn't great, but I think they were getting rebounds, right? And they have low turnover percentages in those minutes. I love Court Sketch, by the way, guys. Like, I know I'm plugging the hell out of this thing right now, but I was so happy to find matchup specific lineup data, because not every website lets you filter by opponent when you're looking at lineup stuff, and that was big. Let's go to the Tim corner 3 next. So for this one, pick and roll, Jamal just initiates. Really, it's been so easy for Jamal to get downhill with Jaden this year. And this one, he doesn't even start off ball. He just runs into the screen with the ball. And then, DiVincenzo tries to come over to help. Like, he's going to affect literally anything, but Jokic gets Tim the ball, and that's an open corner 3 for Tim. We didn't talk about this with Matt Brooks on the show because he's, propagandist for the Denver Nuggets. But I am concerned about Tim. Like, I'm just kind of like, there's no way this lasts, right? Like, he's just been so solid. And even the reason I focused on my X Factor clips, not on the 3-point shooting, which I think is super volatile, but on things that just rely on Tim's, like, above average ball skills, like not like highly skilled or anything, but like he can do some things within the flow of actions to kind of mimic some of the counters that Jamal employs to gimmick defenses, not just, what is he doing against like the basic coverages, hitting threes and maybe getting all the way downhill against drop, but like some of the counters that Tim has employed against the gimmick defenses in this matchup have been so impressive to me. And I think that that's going to be really big for Denver's ability, to get out of this series quickly. In addition to obviously keeping up the 3-point shooting, I didn't even check what Tim was shooting in this matchup in particular, but every single game I watched to review for this episode, it was like, nope, Tim was just awesome. Like, it wouldn't have surprised me if he averaged 20 points per game against the Wolves this season. And it just kind of made me wonder, like, can he keep this up? Because if he can, that's massive for Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about Jamal getting downhill, but I like the clips you showed of Tim as the X factor attacking guards, like attacking Mike Conley and DiVincenzo. I think he could get that all the time if those guys are out there, or maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time, you know. So Tim's not great on defense, but I think he could really help destroy some dudes out there on offense. Of course, I mean that's why we have him. The shooting's crazy, and just the corner spacing with Tim. The fact that we have so many other guys that can just stand in the corner to just help Jokic and Jamal is massive too. Like that will help Jamal get downhill.
Yeah. Let's see. We talked about some of the X factors. We talked about Jamal's shooting, and yeah, we really need Spencer back at some point early in this series, preferably. I think he's got so much energy. We just need somebody to help us contest the offensive glass. We're not going to win that battle necessarily, because Denver is like 24th in offensive rebounding percentage. It's funny because like last season they couldn't defensive rebound to save their lives, but they were a great offensive rebounding team. They just like didn't care about anything on the defensive end last year. But they're a great defensive rebounding team now, 7th in defensive rebounding percentage. But they're 24th in offensive rebounding percentage. And Minny, they're not great actually on either end with the glass. Like they're 20th in defensive rebound, which is shocking for a team that's so big. Like that's worse than Denver was last year. And they're 15th in offensive rebounding percentage. But it feels like whenever they play Denver, they get a lot of offensive rebounds. So we need somebody to kind of like balance the scales in that respect and like help Jokic and AG out. Maybe Val will, help that too. Just like don't get crushed on that aspect of the possession battle. And it'll also put a little bit less pressure on the team to be like perfect when it comes to turnovers, although like keeping those low too would be great. Dahlia says we need Zeke. I think David Adelman would sooner play Tyus Jones in the playoffs than Zeke Naji. I'm not even kidding.
Just because we have such a need for the backup four against this front court, but yeah.
What was the last? There was a game that Zeke played because he had to, because we didn't have any one, and he was like -8 in like less than a minute or something. It wasn't game 82. Was it against the Thunder? Or was it against the Spurs?
That we played Tyus?
No, that Zeke. No, that Zeke came in the first half, but he was like a -8 in like 56 seconds and got pulled forever. And I was like, oh, he's never playing again.
Dahlia says it was the Spurs.
It was the Spurs game. Okay. I believe that. It was a recent one. So, we didn't get to talk too much about the players that I think are going to be issues in this matchup. I'm going to reframe it a little bit though, because I talked a lot about like, rewatching these games, it felt like the Wolves had a lot more upside in terms of what they could clean up, right? But Cam and Christian were just straight up bad in the games that they played in. Maybe Christian had like one game where he was efficient offensively, but like defensively, we're talking blow-bys, we're getting lost in screens. The shooting, not good. And not just the missing shots, but the hesitation on shots. And hopefully that's just out of his system now after March, although I don't trust March basketball. And then Cam, I think he missed 2 games straight up and only played in half of one of the ones he played in because he got hurt in it. But then was physically overwhelmed. Like, it was very similar to his last game against, not his last game against OKC, maybe the second to last, where it was like, oh, you're getting bodied and just like physically taken out of it. Like in a way, fairly similarly to what people complained about when it came to MPJ against this very same matchup. But we're talking regular season basketball. Now, here's another thing. Like, you could call those guys X factors, because if either one of them decides to get their shit together and like play well on one or both ends of the floor in this series, it would completely shift the calculus for Denver towards like, if you wanted to say Denver in 5, it's the kind of thing that could push it to Denver in 4 if one of them like has a hot half on either end of the floor and it's just like good. It's one of the one of the reasons I agree with you that you like or it wasn't you, it was Matt that said this could be a really big series for Julian Strawther, is because like Julian just straight up performed better in this matchup than either Cam or Christian did. And was not like overwhelmed by this team. We can quibble about the technique and the defensive lapses here and there, which are very big and very important, especially when you're talking about playoff basketball where every possession counts. But in terms of just like looking like he belonged on the floor generally, I think that he was like higher on that scale than Cam or Christian was in their regular season games against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So yeah, anything else you want to say about the matchup before we get to our bracket predictions?
Well, let's Arc Smart's talking about how he's worried about, McDaniels having a huge series and how Pwat has historically been a really good defensive matchup on him, which makes sense because they're a similar archetype of player. Like they're both athletes. Pwat's a good athlete. Are you worried about McDaniels' offense? Because he has improved it this year. And he was not playing like that in our series.
That's another sort of downside risk for Minnesota, because like Denver went 3-1 in the series with McDaniels absolutely torching them for all 4 games. And it just kind of didn't matter. And I'm not saying like he could do that against us in the playoffs too, but it's just I'm almost baking that in my assessment of Minnesota. So if he has any kind of market drop off in his efficiency or even like potentially his volume, that just means like worse offensive players are taking more of those possessions potentially, then it could be a problem for Minnesota. So I don't look at that as like a worry for Denver, because I just kind of assume it's going to happen. But if it doesn't happen, that's awesome. Right?
Yeah. We'll see. I maybe am coping a bit because I've heard some people talk about how this may not even be the best Pwat series because he doesn't have the best chance to guard Ant anyway. And I think people think of him as a great option to guard Ant, but if you've been paying attention to the Nuggets and watching them, I don't think
Ant
that's
just goes a lot more off ball, and it's way easier to lose Peyton than like I almost, even though I don't think that Peyton's like a fantastic matchup for this person either, I think it's a better comp for like the kind of archetype that you want Peyton. Well, one of the types of archetypes, I do think that Peyton can be pretty versatile, but a player like Shea that is a lot less dynamic in like the variety of ways that they like to attack, to where Peyton doesn't have to think quite as much when it comes to executing the coverage, and can just like play a lot more intuitively and like use his athleticism and things like that. Ant within Finch's offense does a lot more different things that I think end up being a problem for a player like Peyton to guard in volume anyway. I don't think Peyton's quite at that point yet in this stage of his career as a defender, to be able to be like the guy on that player.
I just see I mean, this may be simplifying it too much, but McDaniels and Nas and those guys being the, driving kick options who are making shots and making timely shots, and whether we can match that. But I do think we have the capability to win a shot making battle where it comes down to who's hitting threes in big moments. Like we have guys that can finally do that this year, and more than we've had before. And I know the Wolves are, McDaniels' 3-point shooting is hitting better, and Nas always kills us and stuff like that. But I think we have a chance to mitigate that. And I don't know. I'm not worried about it as much, but I get the concern for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's get to our playoff bracket predictions. I think what we'll do today is just do our round 1 predictions. And then when things get called, then we don't we can still use the graphic.
Okay.
The graphic of the bracket, but I mean in terms of what we're predicting. We don't have to go all the way across for every potential series.
All right, I'm going to switch over to that, but I don't think I set up your camera, so it might look weird. Yeah. Of course, it looks very weird right now, but we'll get it set up.
Movie magic.
Behind the scenes. What the hell is going on here? There's Grace.
Yay.
All right. Let's do it.
All right. We don't
Start
know
with your bracket.
All right, my bracket. All right. Round 1. I'm picking OKC over the Suns. Over whoever.
Yeah, well, who do you want to pick? I kind of want to see who you're going to pick for this.
I hate it, but as soon as Golden State won the game against the Clippers, I was like, okay, I guess the Suns are making the playoffs. The Golden State is just a significantly worse team, and the Suns are not great. And they might lose the play-in game, but I would, if I were a betting man, which I'm neither a betting person nor a man, I would put my money on Phoenix to win that play-in game. Yeah.
Okay.
Prove me wrong, Steph. Honestly, I would love to see it at this point.
Yeah.
I think a Warriors Thunder series also goes more than 4. I'm not saying it would go more than 5, but I think it would go more than 4. I think Lakers Rockets is actually interesting because it's not going to be a short series. The Lakers are weird when they have just LeBron. I think that they're a fraud team on the whole, but I think when they have just LeBron or just Luka, to a lesser degree, or Reeves with either one of those two, even though he's not playing. I think he's out for the rest of the season with the oblique thing, no matter how far they get. I've heard two people talk he might come back, but Franz and Paolo were out for 2 months with their oblique tears.
Yeah. That is a long one. Anything that's core tear related does send people out a lot.
Yeah, because you can't. It's harder to it's harder. It just takes longer to heal because of how much movement is involved in that. What was I talking about? Lakers Rockets. Rockets. I'm gonna go with Rockets. But I still haven't seen this team win a playoff series, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers upset. I think that's the series of the first round in the West side. I think it's the one with the highest upset potential. Unsurprisingly, right? It's the 4-5 game, so whatever.
I'm gonna agree, so I'm gonna just do my little bracket here. OKC is gonna win for sure. I think I don't know who I'd rather see play them. Would it be fun just to see Steph play them, or would it be fun?
Yeah, it'd be way give me more games of Steph Curry. I don't care about. I mean, sure, give me more games of Colin Gillespie, but there's nobody on the Suns that I care to watch. So
yeah, and I just don't see any way that the Lakers come out of this. There's too injured. It's just too impossible.
Yeah, their roster sucks, man. But the Rocket, that you're well, you say all this, Grace, but you're giving the Lakers a chance to. And it has more to do with the Rockets than the Lakers. I think that team is a hot mess. Their offense is putrid, and I think that JJ Redick has become a better coach with time. But there's only so many tools that you can use, which is why I ultimately picked the Rockets. I'm picking Denver in this series against Minnesota. I think Minnesota has a chance. I kind of drew the blueprint for what it would look like if Minnesota came out of the series, but I think that Denver just has more margin for error here. There are more ways I think that Denver can win it, and they can potentially win it quickly. Hopefully, because
how many games are you gonna pick?
I would love for it to go 5, but I feel like it's going to go 6. But also, I hate picking 6 because, closing out a series on the road is tough. And I hate the idea of this going to a game 7. So I'm almost picking 5 out of self-preservation.
We've been good on the road. Maybe we can do a closer game
maybe
in
we
6.
can. So I really feel like this is a 5-gamer. I think if Denver, honestly, gets to a point where they're 3-1 in this series, then they've figured it out and can close out in 5. Yeah, that's the hope. So I'm gonna go with 5. But I wouldn't be surprised with 6. I would hate 7, but like I could see that too. Like I could see this series going anywhere from 5 to 7.
I like. We cannot let it go to a 7-game series, and I know some people are picking that, like for Wolves
they
and for Nuggets,
because even if they win, it's like you're gonna have less left for subsequent rounds. Like if they're serious and they're like, okay, the switch is flipped or whatever, and we're really in like we have a chance at the title mode, you need to take care of this team fast.
Yeah, Nuggets in 5 would be amazing. We have to kind of get into another gear in a way to get that, because it's just such consistent to win 4 out of 5 out of 5
against
games
a good
crazy.
team. Like we talked about the issues that Minnesota has, like in this. I know they're the 6th seed, but they're a good, talented, versatile team, and they're not going to be easy to put down. So like that is not like me saying Nuggets in 5 is not an indictment of Minnesota. It's just like I just see a gap between these two teams at this stage. Like right now, we didn't even talk about the fact that we don't know like if Ant's going to be 100% with the runner's knee kind of thing being like a recurrent topic. If Jaden is all the way ramped up for the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Which is just another fact. Like that's the thing that pushes me more towards 5 than 6. Is like if either one of those guys is even slightly hampered, that just makes Denver's job that much easier. Yeah.
I feel like we haven't played a lot of teams that have had significant injuries. Well, I mean, both of them are going to be able to play. So they're not like missing.
Are you talking about in the regular season or like in the
playoffs? Like I was trying to think
the title year, like the first 2 rounds, right? Because they were missing Nas and Jaden, and then the Suns were down CP3.
Yeah, because you punched the wall or whatever.
And I guess honestly, you could look at that Suns team as more injured than they were because CP3 went out, and then their whole roster had been gutted for the KD trade. So that was
I joked
that much
during
more
that
damaging.
Series that they were better off with CP3 injured because Booker was just going off like goddamn. Anyway.
Yeah, that was true until it wasn't, like many things.
I think it's going to be 6 games. Nuggets win in 6.
Yeah, that's
which is just pushing the border of it going too long and it being too taxing on us. But that's just what the Wolves Nuggets series always are, unless, like you said, Ant and Jaden are injured, which I don't want them to be like injured further. But if they're dealing with lingered injuries and not being able to play their best game, that's great for us. So. Definitely hoping for that. I'm not going to lie.
And then I'm picking the Spurs over the Blazers because they're a way, way, way better team. But I'm hoping the Blazers can push it to 5. I hope they get a game off of Wemby. Maybe they push it to 6 because of Spurs' inexperience, right? This isn't a situation, in my opinion, like 2024, where the Thunder played the Pelicans in round 1 and ended up sweeping them. All close games, by the way. Like I think all 4 of those games went down to the wire except for one that was a blowout. But let's say it was like that, I think San Antonio is maybe not as good at closing those types of games as OKC was because of Shea. Like they have Wemby, which like defensively great, right? Offensively, things get a little bit sticky with that team. So it's more about the Spurs and the Blazers. Like, I don't think the Blazers are like that good. I was kind of surprised that they won that game, to be honest, even though I'm a Blazers person this season in terms of being like, I promise they're better than you think they are. Me subtweeting friend of the show, Matt Moore, who was I think it was the beginning of last season where he asked me to compare the Blazers and the Wizards in terms of how many players do I think are on their rosters that will be in the NBA in 3 years. And I was like, I mean, that's a question, I guess, but like the Blazers are the better young team. Like they have more guys. He fought me on that. And now Blazers are fighting back. Anyway, that's an agenda. But I don't think they're good. Like good enough to like beat the Spurs more than maybe once in this series. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the Spurs like flubbed like another game and it went 6. But I expect them to get it done in 4 or 5.
I just can't wait to see how the Spurs handle them. Like if it is in 4 or 5 and because they've not
7.
played in the playoffs. So I can't wait to see what they look like. I am disappointed I agree the Spurs are going to win that series. I'm disappointed the Blazers didn't end up somehow like having to play the Thunder in the first round, because I would have loved the Shea Denny grift off and everyone being really annoyed at that, and maybe Denny not getting that whistle because he's playing against the Thunder and seeing him getting pissed off about that. But anyway, here we are.
I'm kind of expecting no sweeps in the West in round 1. Like I think the Spurs could sweep the Blazers.
You mean but OKC Suns?
Including OKC. Like I think I think OKC is finally gonna give up a game in round 1.
That would be cool.
That would be cool.
I don't want them to go like
if only for one night NBA Twitter could unite in ecstasy.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the West.
So you
agree it's pretty easy.
You agree on those for yours as your bracket as well?
Yeah, but I do hope some of these are. Although I don't know, like, should we root for a shorter series in the Lakers Rockets just so whoever comes out is more rested versus OKC in the second round? It's almost like I'm going to have to root for a Rockets sweep or something just to like have them be a little bit more healthy. But I really, I need the Blazers to push the Spurs to more games for sure.
Oh, that's the other thing. That's a good point. I not only think the Rockets will win that series, although I give the Lakers a chance. I hope the Rockets win because there's not a chance in hell that the Lakers are going to do anything with OKC in their current state.
Yeah.
So go Rockets. Okay, in the East, I'm picking Hornets in the play-in game. I'm picking Hornets against the Pistons because I don't know when Cade's coming back for one. And there's the JB Bickerstaff tax on the Pistons when it comes to playoff basketball. And that's crazy because you're like, Grace, you're picking LaMelo over like literally. And it's like, yeah, that's
your
where
team.
I'm at. Oh, well, I mean, the Magic are a hot mess right now. It would be so Orlando Magic though to come out and win this game against the Charlotte Hornets that everybody's been in love with all season or the second half of the season because they've been so good, especially offensively. I think they're also ranked above us defensively, which is really embarrassing. Yeah, they're 14th. So average defense, 5th offense. That's so Denver, please. Like, you got to pick it up. But it would be so Orlando Magic to end up just getting embarrassed in that game against the Sixers and then winning this game against the Hornets and then giving us the ugliest series that the playoffs have seen in over a decade against the Detroit Pistons.
I'm going to say the Magic win. Basketball gods are going to smite the Hornets for that abhorrent behavior.
That'd be great.
But yeah, Pistons are going to win that. Although they don't. Yeah,
the Pistons are going to win that. I'm sorry. The JB Bickerstaff tax only works against teams that have an offense. So, or it only applies against teams that have an offense, and Orlando doesn't. So, the Pistons would definitely win that.
Yep.
Do you want to pick the next series?
So we got Cavs and Raptors, which I'm picking the Cavs for sure.
Darko versus Kenny. I'll just pick the Raptors because I really don't have a good read on that series. I haven't watched either of these teams enough this season. I like to think that like Harden makes the Cavs make more sense. But I also love the idea of the Cavs underperforming again.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to pick the Raptors out of spite.
That'd be fun. That would be creating some fun narratives for the LeBron summer if the Cavs like completely crash out.
True. But we don't want that because we want there to be more of a question about whether the Lakers keep him so that they spend more time frittering away trying to make a decision and not being able to give Peyton an offer sheet. So
yeah, there you go.
Oh my God, Hawks, Knicks. I'm gonna pick Knicks. Like I think they're the better team, but I think this goes 6 or 7. I don't like the Hawks. I don't think the Hawks are good, but the Knicks went 6 with the Pistons last year that I don't think were that good, and I think this Hawks team is like comparable. But I have to pick the Knicks. Like they're more experienced. They've got Jalen Brunson. Like they're gonna win, I think. But I think it'll go long. If they go short, I actually give the Knicks a chance in the next series if they take care of this in like 4 or 5.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good series because I think the Celtics are coming out, and so they'd be playing the Celtics. And a Knicks Celtics series, a good one's always fun. The Knicks in the playoffs are always amazing. That's like the one thing in the East that I like watching. They've had some crazy series and games the last couple of years.
Yeah, they're kind of like Nuggets East in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Where they'll always give you a good series, sometimes to the chagrin of their own fans.
Yep. Yeah, but I'm picking the Knicks for sure.
Yeah. And then who do you pick between you said Celtics are coming out of the Sixers series. How long do you think that would be?
I think it could be 5 games.
I think it's 4 if Joel plays.
Is he not going to play? Is there a chance
I don't know. He didn't play in the play-in.
Oh, that's crazy.
I think it's 5 or 6 if he doesn't play.
Yeah. If he doesn't play.
Yeah. Trying to think. I'm like, I don't know, Maxey and VJ or something, and Paul George is okay window dressing. I think the Celtics have a decisive coaching edge in this matchup, but I know they were great when Tatum came back like instantly and was just like good again, but something about it I don't totally trust. You're still dealing with Jaylen Brown. So I think the Jaylen Brown tax tells me it's going to go 6. I think it's going to go 6.
That'd be pretty cool. I would also need it's hard to think about the East or care about it because we have such a crazy path to get through. But if we do somehow get through this and get to the finals, you want these teams.
Any team but the Knicks or Cavs.
Which I feel like is a very good chance. I feel like I'm more confident that the Pistons or Celtics get to the finals now than either of them. Which would be a better matchup.
I don't think the Pistons are making the finals, but.
I saw Zite pick the Pistons to win the NBA Finals.
They're like, I mean, they don't have Cade right now, and they're ranked. So they actually creeped up to 10th in offense, but they were sitting outside the top 10 for most of the season. I don't trust that side of the ball, especially come playoff time. Like they don't really have anybody outside of Cade, so it's just easy for teams to swarm them. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they went out to Orlando even in round 1 if Orlando made it. Just because it's just going to be an ugly series. And if they don't have Cade, it just defaults to, like, which team made threes that night. Which, I mean, that's going to... I mean, both teams are terrible. Obviously, Orlando is going to be, I think, the worst at that. Let me look at actual shooting. Oh, my God. Orlando is 27th. In 3-point efficiency, and Detroit's 17th, so like closer to average. God, it's so bad in Orlando. Yeah.
Well, the first round's super easy. The other ones are I mean, it kind of sucks that the hardest one to predict is our series. I mean, I feel like we're both pretty confident.
I think the hardest one to predict is Cavs Raptors because I don't know enough about those teams.
Okay, yeah.
But of the teams that I actually like follow on a regular basis, I think ours is.
I feel like that one's easy. I feel like Cavs are gonna win.
Actually, I don't think ours is hard to predict. Like I said, I think Denver wins it. I just don't know how long it's gonna be.
Yeah.
And I obviously hope it's shorter.
But if we get to a game 7, do you feel like that it like gives them a little bit of an edge because we keep losing these series in 7 games, or do you feel like we finally get the monkey off our back and like win a game 7?
I mean, they won a game 7 last year that gets the Clippers.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I mean, they could win it, they could not. But at that point, I'm more like it kind of doesn't matter because I don't think that you beat the Spurs if you go 7 in round 1. I just don't.
Yeah,
I know you have the advantage there, but the Spurs are going to dispatch with the Blazers in 4 or 5. Most likely.
It was crazy.
And they're a young, athletic team with, on the ascent. And yes, you have some matchup advantages over them, but that's not enough to overcome that big of a rest gap, especially when you're talking about every game played is another opportunity for guys to get injured again. So if Denver's serious here, they are going to finish this series preferably in less than 6, but definitely have to finish in less than 7.
It was crazy that we played the 7-game series versus the Clippers and then went 7 games with Oklahoma City. That was quite a showing of will. So hopefully, I mean, I know
after the season that they do, because Denver's done that before. They have this thing for going 7 in consecutive rounds. But the season that they had where it was everybody hates each other. The coach got fired. The GM got fired with 3 days left, and they still had that is pure. That's when you're fighting out of pure spite. You're just I didn't hear no bell. That was the Denver Nuggets last year. And while I'd like to see that come out of them this year as well, I hope I don't have to see it come out in round 1. I want them to just lay the hammer down.
Yeah. I feel like with Jamal and Jokic looking as good as they do, it really does improve our chances a lot to start out early, though I don't like that we're going to come off this rest. And tomorrow, the first game is the dreaded matinee game. Everyone, Nuggets fans know we usually look kind of shitty in 1:30 or the 3:30 Eastern time slot, but we'll see.
Man, I forgot about that. Damn.
Yeah. So it's a quick one. It'll be here soon. So we'll be watching the game, and I'll be excited to break down actual playoff film. But we had some good clips on the show today to talk about what might happen. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, even though it went long. But we had another guest on, and it was a great show.
Yes. And if you guys have made it this far, you are the true sickos. We need a name for our fandom, Will. We'll come up with something. Maybe we'll put out a poll with some ideas. Maybe you guys can submit some ideas in the chat for the fandom and in the comments, and we'll put out a poll for what to call you What's in a Game followers. But we appreciate you guys the absolute most. If you like our content, please remember to click the like button, hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social so that you never miss show announcements, as well as little graphics and this poll that we're gonna put out for this nickname. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks, especially losing Game 7 at home when you were up 20 in the second half.
It's time for revenge.